On Christmas, I prepare a feast and wait for my wife to introduce me to her family after 9 years of being married in secret. Just as I wait with anticipation, my wife walks through the door, holding her first love's hand. Their fingers are interlocked, and their eyes are brimming with affection. Mom, Dad, this is Henry Cooper, my husband. We've been secretly married for the past 10 years. What a handsome young man. You two look perfect together. My mother-in-law is grinning from ear to ear. They stand there chatting, looking like a happy family. Then my wife turns to me, her gaze icy. This is my live-in housekeeper. Come try the food and see if you like it. My wife invites her family to take their seats, but Henry Cooper looks at me with a hint of disdain. The host hasn't even sat down yet. How can the housekeeper sit first? Where are your manners? Henry Cooper's words drew the attention of my in-laws, Julian Finch and Lily Sullivan. They both turned to look at me too, their gazes tinged with displeasure. I was slightly taken aback as my wife, Faith Finch, stepped forward, her expression cold. You actually think you can sit here? You're just a housekeeper. If you don't want to work here, get lost. I stare at Faith in disbelief. Before I could even react, she slapped me. Why are you looking at me like that? Got a problem? Seeing Faith slap me, Henry hurried forward, playing the peacemaker. Easy, Faith. Julian and Lily just got here today. Don't let someone unimportant like him spoil your mood. But when Henry looked at me, he wore a smug expression. He's right, Faith. Lily chimed in from the side. You should just get rid of a housekeeper like this. Hire another one. I was about to get up and explain, but Faith grabbed me by the ear and shoved me out the door. As I stared at the tightly shut door, everything I had looked forward to suddenly came crashing down. I collapsed to the ground and came down with a high fever. After learning that Julian and Lily were coming over to celebrate Christmas, I worked day and night over the past couple of days, preparing for their arrival and cleaning the house until it was spotless. I ended up catching a cold from pushing myself too hard. I only got a chance to sit when Julian and Lily arrived. But my excitement was only met with cold indifference from her entire family. I pushed myself up and staggered forward. At some point, it had started raining. When I was kicked out of the house, I was only wearing a thin shirt and a pair of shorts. Getting caught in the rain only made my fever worse. When I passed by a convenience store, I went in and asked to borrow the owner's phone. I wanted to call Faith and ask her to let me come back and pick up some clothes. As soon as the call went through and she heard my voice, her tone changed. Wesley, didn't I tell you to leave after you finished cooking? If it weren't for Henry earlier, I would have given myself away. I'm very disappointed in you. I want you to reflect on yourself. Once you've figured things out, come back and apologize to Henry. Before I could even speak, Faith ended the call. I chuckled coldly, and something inside me died. A gust of wind swept past as I walked out of the store, and I collapsed to the ground. Before I passed out, images of Faith and Henry's loving moments came to mind. Then I blacked out. Faith, 10 years had passed. Since you never loved me, let's end it here. By the time I came to, I was in the hospital. I stared at the ceiling in a daze and realized I was lying in a hospital bed. You're awake. When the door to the hospital room opened, a figure stepped inside. I turned to look, and my heart sank. Was it you who saved me, Ashley? I was a little disappointed. Ashley Town smiled and nodded as she looked at me. What, not happy to see me? I quickly shook my head and Ashley said, It's Christmas. Why weren't you at home? Why were you out wandering around with a high fever? You were barely dressed too. Were you trying to make yourself sicker? The concern in Ashley's voice warmed my heart. But when I thought of that so-called home, I couldn't help but let out a self-deprecating laugh. I came out to buy a few things and forgot my keys. Ashley didn't call me out on my flimsy lie. I wanted to pay her back for my medical bills, but when I checked my pockets, I realized I hadn't brought a single thing with me after being kicked out of the house. Ashley waved it off dismissively. Don't worry about it. Consider it a Christmas gift, since you're our top salesperson. Ashley bought me a new set of clothes and a new phone as well. Before leaving, she looked at me. Wesley, the company has a project overseas, and we need more people on board. If you're up for it, give me a call. If everything goes well, I'll make you the general manager of that branch. She gave me a quick nod before turning to leave. During my marriage to Faith, I often had to juggle my career with holding the household together. Whenever the company needed someone to go on business trips, I always turned them down. I had done that because I wanted Faith to always have a hot meal waiting for her at home. And in doing so, I'd missed out on many opportunities. I recalled everything Faith had done. Ever since we got married, she had been cold and distant toward me. She often used work as an excuse to come home late. The truth was, she had been meeting Henry behind my back. One time, when she got drunk, he was the one who carried her to bed. They slept in each other's arms, and I got cast aside, forced to spend the night on the couch. With that in mind, I didn't hesitate any longer and called Ashley. I told her I was willing to go overseas. She sounded relieved on the phone. I'm glad to hear that. I'll book you on the earliest flight available. You'll probably be leaving the country in about 3 days, so get ready. After ending the call, I decided to go home and pack. After all, once I went abroad, I wouldn't be coming back often. Once I had completed the discharge paperwork at the hospital, I headed home. As soon as I opened the door, the stench of blood hit me. Julian and Henry were in the living room, chatting over coffee. Just then, Lily opened the door and stepped out of the kitchen. When she saw me, her face twisted with disdain. Oh, look who remembers he's the housekeeper. The whole house is in a mess, yet you don't even do your job. I don't know why my daughter even hired you in the first place. Since I was already planning to leave, I had no intention of putting up with their nonsense anymore. I was about to retort when I saw the trash bag Lily was holding. The outside of the bag was covered in white fleece. You're back just in time. Take this trash downstairs and get rid of it. Once you're done, come back right away and cook for us. Something cold settled in my chest. I opened the bag and found a strip of sheepskin inside. I recognized it immediately. It was Fluffy, the sheep I'd had for 8 years. I didn't dare think about what it could mean. I flung the trash bag aside, shoved Lily out of the way, and dashed into the kitchen. As soon as I stepped inside, I went limp and collapsed to the floor. I saw something bubbling away in the pot. Hanging beside the cabinet were freshly butchered pieces of meat. You cooked my sheep? I turned and glared at Lily, who replied uneasily. So that was your sheep? That's right. I cooked it. Well, it's just a sheep. I can always pay you back for it. Seeing how indifferent Lily was, I felt anger surge within me. Mom had raised Fluffy before she passed away, and he was the only connection I had left to her. How dare you kill my sheep? I'm going to kill you. Seeing that I was about to resort to violence, Lily immediately backed away in fear. Before I knew it, Henry dashed into the kitchen and shoved me to the floor. Hearing the commotion, Faith came out of her room. The moment she saw my furious expression, she started yelling at me. Wesley, what are you doing? Don't you dare hit my mother. Looking at Faith, I suddenly felt sick to the stomach. I had never felt so disgusted by my wife before. So what if I hit her? Your mom killed my sheep. Faith froze at that, then turned to look at Lily. With someone backing her up, Lily puffed up with confidence. Henry said he wanted to eat mutton. Since I didn't know where to get any, I figured I'd just slaughter this random sheep I saw. Henry's my son-in-law, so I had to do something. The moment Lily said son-in-law, she looked incredibly proud. I looked at Faith, hoping she would give me a reasonable explanation. Instead, all I got was an impatient look. Mom only did it for Henry. Wesley, can't you be more sensible? I looked at Faith with icy disdain. By then, I was utterly disappointed in her. I raised Fluffy for 8 years. You know what he meant to me. Faith, give me back my sheep. I could feel myself losing control. My eyes bloodshot. Seeing me rush toward Faith, Lily immediately yelled. He's crazy. He's nuts. Quick. Get security to throw him out. Henry caught on fast and stepped in front of Faith like a shield. I swung and hit him square in the face. Blood instantly trickled from the corner of his mouth. I grabbed him by the collar, wishing I could just tear him to pieces. But Henry looked pleased with himself when he saw how angry I was. He deliberately leaned in and whispered, Not only did I get your sheep killed, but I also slept with your wife. What are you going to do about it? Something inside me snapped, and I landed punch after punch on Henry's face. His face was covered in blood. While I was getting back up, he took the opportunity to grab me and start a fight. The plates and bowls crashed off the counter and shattered across the kitchen floor. Henry and I went down together, our hands wrapped around each other's throats. None of us could gain the upper hand. Eventually, I forced him into a corner, got on top of him, and pinned him down. Behind me, I heard Faith let out a startled gasp. Wesley, have you lost your mind? Stop that right now. If you hurt Henry, I won't let you get away with it. Even now, all she cared about was Henry. Then what did our relationship of 10 years mean to her? I didn't want to press any further. It was all meaningless. I raised my fist, ready to punch him again. At that moment, I suddenly felt a sharp pain shoot through the back of my head. The pain immediately intensified. I quickly got to my feet, hand flying to the back of my head. When I pulled away, my fingers were slick with blood, the back of my shirt already soaked through. I saw Faith standing behind me, fear written all over her face. She was holding a bloody high heel. When she saw me turn around, her gaze suddenly hardened with determination. Faith shoved me aside, hurried to Henry and helped him up. Henry, are you okay? Where does it hurt? But Henry didn't even look at Faith. He shoved her aside and lunged at me. I had humiliated him earlier, so he wanted to get back at me. Damn you. How dare you hit me? I'm going to kill you. Henry kicked me again and again, venting his anger. Faith simply stood by. She was even worried that Henry might twist his ankle. The pain shooting through the back of my head and all over my body nearly made me black out. Since I had lost too much blood, I had no strength to fight back. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was Faith clinging to Henry, looking worried. He spat at me, like a winner basking in his victory. Tui, you're pathetic. The police brought me to the hospital. Just then, I received a message from Henry. It was a pregnancy test report. Faith and I are having a baby. I hope you know when to walk away. My fingers trembled slightly as I stared at the pregnancy test report on my phone. I couldn't stop a tear from slipping down my cheek. It wasn't as if Faith and I never thought of having kids of our own. Whenever we tried for a baby, Faith would claim she wasn't feeling well to avoid being intimate with me. That was why we still didn't have any kids after all this time. Henry seemed to think he hadn't humiliated me enough, and sent me another message. It was a photo of Faith wearing a sexy lace nightgown. In the picture, she looked incredibly alluring, desire shining in her eyes. It was a stark contrast to how cold and detached she was with me. And the background was actually the bedroom I had shared with her for so many years. Suddenly, I found it hard to breathe. I never imagined that my aloof wife could look like that in front of another man. And of all places, in our bedroom too. I had completely lost all hope and faith. I then forwarded the photo and the pregnancy test report to my lawyer, and asked him to start drafting the divorce papers. Over the next 2 days, I remained in the hospital. Faith never came to see me. She had gone to watch the meteor shower with Henry instead. My situation didn't even affect them in the slightest. Every so often, I would receive photos from Henry. There were pictures of him and Faith kissing, as well as photos of him with Julian and Lily. I saved every single one, and forwarded them to my lawyer as evidence of Faith's infidelity. The next day, my lawyer informed me that the divorce papers were ready. I did the math and realized I was scheduled to go abroad the following day. It's time to put an end to all of this. Once again, I returned to the house that no longer felt like home. Faith was the only one there. Henry had gone with Julian and Lily to the mountains to enjoy the snow, and she had only come by to pick up a few things. Seeing that I was back, she tossed me a gift box from the couch, her expression blank. "I got this watch for you. See if you like it." I bent down and picked it up. It was obvious that it had been opened before. Before I could even speak, Faith continued. "I actually bought it for Henry. He knows you're upset, so you can have it as compensation. You've been through a lot these past 2 days." As Faith spoke, she walked over to me and reached out to stroke my face. I instinctively took a step back and tossed the gift box aside. "He didn't want it, so you gave it to me instead, right? How ridiculous." I let out a self-deprecating laugh before heading toward the bedroom to pack. Faith followed me, wanting to explain herself. However, when she saw me open the bedroom door, she fell silent again. The room I once knew had completely changed. Every trace of me was gone. My things had been replaced with Henry's clothes and belongings. There was even a wedding photo of the two of them hanging on the wall. Faith seemed to realize she had messed up and quickly explained. "I just wanted to make it look a little more convincing. Since you haven't been home for the past few days, I thought I'd rearrange the room. Your stuff is in the storage room." I didn't want to waste any more time wondering whether Faith even loved me. I no longer wanted to know why she wanted Henry to pretend to be her husband either. I went to the storage room and sorted through the clothes scattered on the floor before packing them into my suitcase. Seeing the look on my face, Faith scowled in displeasure. "Can you stop throwing a tantrum? Henry and I are only pretending to be married for a few days." I didn't even want to argue with her. After packing my things, I handed her the divorce papers. "Sign these." Without even going through the contents, she signed them on the spot. With that, she put on her coat and prepared to leave. Before walking out, she looked back at me. "Wesley, once I'm back, I'll spend more time with you." With a sneer, I placed the divorce papers down on the table, grabbed my suitcase, and turned to leave. The rain had stopped by the time I arrived at the international airport. The terminal was bright, gleaming under halogen lights, bustling with travelers, carrying colorful luggage. Beside me stood Ashley Town, clad in a sleek, charcoal trench coat, holding 2 hot coffees. "Your lawyer just called me, Wesley," Ashley said gently, handing me a cup. "The divorce filing has been submitted to the family court. Because she signed the papers willingly and you provided clear, undeniable evidence of her infidelity and domestic violence, the emergency freeze on your joint bank accounts and the marital property is already in effect." I took a slow sip of the coffee. The warmth bloomed in my chest, cutting through the lingering chill in my bones. "Thank you, Ashley," I said, my voice steady, "for everything." She looked at the bandage wrapped around the back of my head, the wound Faith had given me with her high heel, and her eyes darkened with a mixture of anger and sympathy. "She didn't deserve a single day of your 10 years, Wesley. You built her life, while she walked all over yours. Now let her see what happens when the foundation is pulled out from under her." The boarding announcement chimed over the speakers. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I took out the SIM card, the number Faith, Henry, and her parents had used to torment me, and tossed it into a recycling bin near the gate. As I walked down the jet bridge and stepped onto the plane, I looked out the window at the runway below. 10 years of hidden marriage. 10 years of cooking every meal, cleaning every corner, enduring her cold stares, her excuses, and her hidden meetings with her first love. When the plane lifted into the night sky, piercing through the thick gray clouds, toward the stars, I closed my eyes. Faith Finch was officially dead to me. Meanwhile, 300 miles away at the mountain resort, Faith was standing on the balcony, watching the snow fall. Henry walked out behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What's wrong, babe? You've been staring at your phone all morning." Faith frowned, looking at her screen. It was already 2 days since she had signed those papers and walked out of the house. She had expected Wesley to spam her phone with apology texts. She had expected him to beg her to come back, to promise he wouldn't make a scene about Fluffy the sheep, or Henry or her parents. In the past, whenever they had a disagreement, Wesley would send her paragraphs of soft, pleading messages within 12 hours. Yet her inbox was completely empty. "He's probably just sulking," Faith muttered, though a strange, uncomfortable tightness was starting to form in her chest. He took his suitcase and left the house. Henry let out a disdainful scoff. "Let him sulk. He's a live-in housekeeper with no backbone. Where else can he go? He doesn't have any family left. Once he runs out of money, he'll crawl back on his knees and cook for us." Julian and Lily walked out onto the balcony, sipping hot cocoa. "Faith, don't waste your breath on that useless man," Lily said, her face full of arrogance. "Our Henry is a real man. He's handsome, a tentful, and he's about to make you a mother. That Wesley was just a curse on our family anyway." Faith forced a smile, but her heart wasn't in it. The next day, the snow vacation ended, and the four of them returned to the city. Faith unlocked the front door of the apartment, expecting to see Wesley standing in his apron, a table full of hot dishes waiting for them, and his usual quiet, attentive posture. Instead, the apartment was pitch black. The air was freezing. The scent of disinfectant and blood from 2 days ago had faded, replaced by an eerie, hollow silence. "Wesley," Faith called out, frowning as she flicked on the living room light. "Wesley, stop playing games. We're back. Go make some tea for Mom and Dad." No one answered. Lily walked into the kitchen, expecting her mutton stew to be warmed up. Instead, she found the kitchen completely bare. The blood-stained trash bags had been cleared, the shattered plates swept away, and the cabinets emptied of all Wesley's personal seasonings. "Where is he?" Lily yelled, walking out with an angry expression. "Faith, your housekeeper is getting more and more arrogant. He didn't even prepare dinner." Faith walked into the master bedroom. The room was pristine, too pristine. The wardrobe was half empty. All of Wesley's clothes, his shoes, his books, and even his toothbrush from the bathroom were gone. On the nightstand sat a white envelope. Faith's heart gave a violent, sickening thud. She stepped forward and tore open the envelope. Inside was an official notice from the city district court, accompanied by a letter from the top family law firm in the country. Notice of absolute divorce proceedings and asset injunction. To Mrs. Faith Finch. Please be advised that your spouse, Mr. Wesley Zane, has initiated formal divorce proceedings on the grounds of severe marital infidelity, domestic abuse, and financial fraud. Pursuant to the attached evidence, including certified medical reports of physical assault, police incident logs, and DNA pregnancy tests, all joint accounts, property deeds, and corporate assets under review have been frozen by court order. Faith's hands began to shake violently. The paper fluttered in her grip. "What is this?" she whispered, her face draining of all color. "What is this?" Henry walked into the room, leaning casually against the doorframe. "What's wrong, Faith? Is it another one of his fake suicide notes?" Faith whirled around, her eyes wide with frantic, rising panic. She grabbed her phone and dialed Wesley's number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She called his company. "Hello, this is the HR department of Town Enterprises," a polite voice answered. "Put Wesley on the line," Faith demanded, her voice cracking. "Tell him to stop this ridiculous prank right now." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the HR manager replied coldly. "Mr. Wesley Zane formally resigned 5 days ago. He has accepted an executive appointment abroad and has permanently left the country. Furthermore, his legal team has instructed us to notify you that any further harassment will result in an immediate restraining order." The call went dead. Faith's phone slipped from her fingers, slamming onto the hardwood floor with a sharp, deafening crack. Within a week, Faith's life devolved into a living nightmare. Because Wesley's lawyer had presented undeniable proof of domestic violence, specifically the hospital records detailing the gash on the back of Wesley's head caused by Faith's high heel, the judge issued an immediate freeze on the apartment and Faith's bank accounts. It was only then that Faith discovered a horrifying truth. For the past 10 years, while she had been acting like a high and mighty corporate executive, it was actually Wesley's silent financial management and His late mother's inheritance that had paid off the mortgage on the apartment, funded her company's initial startup capital, and covered her family's lavish lifestyle. Wesley hadn't been living off her. She had been living off him. Without Wesley's connections and his quiet work as the actual technical brain behind her firm, her clients began pulling out one by one. Faith, what is going on? Lily screamed in the living room 3 weeks later, waving an eviction notice. The court is seizing the apartment. How can that useless housekeeper have the power to freeze our home? Faith sat on the sofa, her hair messy, her eyes hollow and bloodshot. It was never my home, Mom. The deed was in Wesley's name. His mother bought it for him before we married. What? Julian gasped, his teacup shattering on the floor. You told us you bought this place. Henry walked out of the bedroom, carrying a leather suitcase. He was dressed in a brand new suit, his coat draped over his arm. Faith looked up, her eyes lighting up with a desperate, pathetic hope. Henry, where are you going? The lawyer said if we can prove you're just a family friend, we might be able to save some of the liquid cash. Family friend? Henry let out a cold, sarcastic laugh. He pulled a thick folder from his bag and tossed it onto the table. Inside was a formal court summons for paternity fraud and extortion. Faith, let's be real, Henry said, sneering as he adjusted his silk tie. I only came back to you because I thought you were a rich CEO with a multi-million-dollar company and a spineless husband who would give you everything. I'm not staying around to go bankrupt with you. Faith froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. What? What did you say? I don't love you, Faith, Henry spat, dropping his fake, tender persona. Completely. I never did. 10 years ago, I dumped you because you were poor. 3 months ago, I found out you had a company, so I came back to leech off you. But it turns out you're just a fraud who relied on her real husband for everything. Lily rushed forward, her face contorted in rage. You shameless bastard. You ate my mutton stew. You slept with my daughter. She's carrying your baby. Henry laughed hysterically, shoving the old woman back so hard she stumbled onto the couch. Baby. Henry pulled out a medical file and threw it in Faith's face. Check the dates, Faith. That pregnancy report I sent Wesley? It wasn't even yours. It belonged to my actual girlfriend in the South. I used a fake photo to provoke Wesley so he would hit me so I could sue him for settlement money. Boom. It felt as though a lightning bolt had struck the room. Faith stared at the medical file on the table. The name on the pregnancy report wasn't hers. The sexy nightgown photo Henry had sent Wesley was taken from an online adult website. Every single bit of it, the meteor shower, the snow trip, the pregnancy, the provocation, had been a calculated scam designed by Henry to destroy her marriage and drain her wealth. And she had believed him. She had slapped her husband of 10 years. She had let her mother slaughter his late mother's sheep. She had struck him on the head with her heel, leaving him bleeding on the floor, all for a parasitic fraud who viewed her as nothing more than an easy mark. Henry, you monster! Faith shrieked, lunging at him like a wild animal. Henry dodged effortlessly, kicked her hard in the stomach, picked up his suitcase and walked out the door, slamming it shut behind him. Faith! Lily wailed, throwing herself onto the floor, clutching her chest. My heart. Call an ambulance. Julian collapsed onto the armchair, weeping tears of pure, pathetic ruin. Faith lay on the cold floor, clutching her stomach, the deafening silence of the empty apartment suffocating her. She looked at the wall where the wedding photo of her and Henry had hung, the photo she had put up to mock Wesley. It had all been a lie. And the man who had genuinely loved her for 10 years, who had cooked every meal, who had built her life, was gone forever across the ocean. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. London, England. The grand ballroom of the Savoy Hotel was filled with international business titans, high-ranking diplomats, and media reporters. Tonight was the annual Global Commerce Summit, hosted by Town Enterprises. On the main stage stood the newly appointed Global Managing Director of Town, N.W. He wore an impeccably tailored navy suit, a silver watch gleaming on his wrist, his hair styled neatly, carrying an aura of quiet, impenetrable power and authority. His face was healthy, his eyes bright, radiating the calm confidence of a man at the absolute peak of the corporate world. It was me. Beside me stood Ashley Town, looking breathtaking in an emerald evening gown. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashley announced into the microphone, her voice echoing through the grand hall. Under the leadership of Managing Director Wesley Zane, our European division has achieved a 300% growth over the past 3 years, securing the largest green energy infrastructure contract in history. The entire ballroom erupted into thunderous, standing applause. Reporters snapped photos endlessly, flashes blinding the stage. I smiled warmly, clinking my glass with Ashley's as we stepped down from the stage to greet the international delegates. Meanwhile, near the service entrance at the back of the ballroom, a small Delegation from a failing overseas import-export firm stood huddled together, looking shabby and nervous. Among them was Faith Finch. She looked unrecognizably aged. Her hair was dry and streaked with gray hair. Expensive dresses long gone, replaced by an ill-fitting, off-the-rack business suit. Her skin was dull, her eyes sunken, surrounded by deep, exhausted dark circles. After the divorce, her company had gone bankrupt within 6 months. To pay off her debts and support her now paralyzed mother and broken father, she had taken an entry-level sales job at a small trading company, working 18 hours a day for a pittance. She had flown to London on a cheap economy ticket, desperate to secure a subcontract from Town Enterprises to save her employer from liquidation. Faith, look, her manager whispered frantically, nudging her arm. That's the global managing director. If we can just get 2 minutes with Mr. Zane, our company might survive. Faith turned her eyes toward the center of the room. When her gaze landed on the tall, handsome man surrounded by international billionaires and security guards, her entire body went rigid. The champagne glass in her hand trembled so violently that liquid spilled over her fingers. Wesley, she choked out, her voice a thin, pathetic squeak. Her manager stared at her in shock. What did you say? You know Director Zane? Faith didn't answer. Her mind shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. 3 years ago, he had been the man wearing a faded shirt, standing in her kitchen, getting slapped by her, getting kicked out into the rain, bleeding from the head while she comforted a scam artist. Now he was a global business titan standing on a mountain peak she couldn't even dream of reaching. Driven by a sudden, hysterical wave of grief and desperation, Faith broke away from her manager and rushed through the crowd toward the VIP area. Wesley, she screamed, her voice cracking through the dignified music of the ballroom. Wesley, 2 heavy-set security guards instantly stepped into her path, pinning her arms behind her back, holding her 3 feet away from me. Ma'am, step back, the guard barked sternly. The surrounding business elites turned their heads, murmuring in disapproval at the disruptive woman. I paused my conversation with a French diplomat and turned around slowly. My eyes fell on Faith. There was no anger in my gaze. No hatred. No bitterness. I looked at her the exact same way I would look at a speck of dust on the carpet. Completely neutral, completely detached, completely indifferent. Wesley, it's me. It's Faith, she wept, tears ruining her cheap makeup, her body shaking as she tried to reach out to me. I found out the truth. Henry lied to me. The baby wasn't mine. Everything was a scam. I was tricked, Wesley. Ashley stepped beside me, her eyes narrowing as she recognized the woman. He made a gesture to call security to throw her out, but I gently raised my hand, stopping her. Let her speak, I said calmly. Faith collapsed onto her knees right there on the polished marble floor of the Savoy Hotel, sobbing hysterically. Wesley, I was wrong. I was blind, she cried, clutching her chest. I missed you every single day for the last 3 years. I kept the watch you left behind. I go to the empty apartment every Christmas and sit in the dark waiting for you. Please, give me one more chance. Let me come back to you. I'll be your wife. I'll cook for you. I'll do anything. The surrounding executives looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. Is she insane? She's begging Director Zane to take her back? What a pathetic, shameless woman. I walked over slowly, stopping 2 feet away from her kneeling form. I looked down at her, my voice clear, quiet, and cold as mountain ice. Faith, I said softly. Faith lifted her tear-streaked, pale face, a frantic, desperate spark of hope flaring in her eyes. Wesley, do you remember the night you kicked me out in the rain? I asked, my tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. Do you remember when your mother slaughtered my sheep, the last thing my dead mother left me? Faith's face turned ghostly white. She shook her head frantically. I didn't know my mom was wrong. I'm sorry. Do you remember when you hit me on the head with your high heel because I fought the man who was sleeping in my bed? I continued, my voice entirely steady. I lay on the hospital floor bleeding, and you walked out to watch the meteor shower with him. Faith choked on her breath, unable to utter a single word, her whole body shuddering in violent, agonizing guilt. 10 years, Faith, I whispered, leaning down slightly so only she could hear. I gave you 10 years of unconditional devotion. I cooked every meal, cleaned every corner, and loved you with everything I had. And you treated me like a dog. I stood up straight, smoothing down the lapels of my tailored suit. You didn't just lose a husband, Faith. You lost the only person in this world who would have died for you. Now live with your choice. I turned my back on her. Security, Ashley ordered flatly. Escort this person off the property and ensure she is blacklisted from all town group venues globally. Wesley. No. Wesley. Faith shrieked, her blood-curdling screams echoing through The grand hall as two security guards dragged her out through the heavy glass doors into the freezing London rain outside. I didn't turn around once. I picked up my champagne glass, turned back to the French diplomat and raised it with a warm, genuine smile. Where were we, monsieur? I asked smoothly. 6 months later. In a small, damp, suburban town back home, a cheap, dingy apartment complex sat near the railway tracks. Inside a dark two-room apartment that smelled of old cabbage and cheap linoleum, Lily sat in a wheelchair, her left side paralyzed from a stroke she had suffered after their house was seized. Julian sat in the corner, staring blankly at a small black and white television set, coughing weak, dry coughs. Faith came home at 11 p.m., wearing a faded coat, her hands raw and bleeding from working double shifts at a local packaging factory. She set down a small plastic bag containing 3 cold steamed buns on the wobbly wooden table. Eat, she said dryly, her voice dead and flat. Lily looked at the cold buns, then looked at Faith, tears welling in her milky, unseeing eyes. Faith, is Wesley coming home tonight? Tell him I want to eat his mutton stew. Faith froze. She stood in the dark, cold kitchen, looking at the rusted stove where no hot meal had been cooked in 3 years. She remembered the Christmas feast Wesley had prepared 3 years ago, the roasted meats, the fresh pastries, the spotless house, and the man who had stood there with warm eyes, waiting to meet her family. And she had brought Henry through the door, interlocked her fingers with a scam artist, and called her husband a housekeeper. Faith slowly sat down on the cold floor of the kitchen, pulling her knees to her chest. She pulled a small, scratched watch out of her pocket, the watch Wesley had rejected before he walked out of her life forever. She clutched the cold metal against her heart, burying her face in her arms, letting out an agonizing, silent sob that tore through her empty chest in the dark. Out on the street, the cold rain began to fall, tapping against the window panes like ghostly fingers. There was no hot meal waiting. There was no devoted husband to hold her. There was only the endless, freezing night, and a lifetime of inescapable, crushing regret.